Retiring at 40 instead of 65 doesn't mean you need twice the savings. It means you need 4 times as much. That's not a typo. And it's not because early retirement is twice as long. 4 separate mathematical forces stack on top of each other, and most people planning to retire early only see the first one. Start with the obvious one. How long does your money actually need to last? Retire at 65 and plan to age 85. That's 20 years of withdrawals. Retire at 40 and plan to the same age. That's 45 years, not double, 2.25 times. Person A retires at 65, spends $50,000 a year, and needs $1,000 in simple terms. Person B retires at 40, same spending, same lifespan, needs $2,250,000. That 2.25x multiplier is just the starting point, and we haven't touched any of the harder effects yet. The second force is subtler, the safe withdrawal rate. This is the percentage of your portfolio you can spend each year without running out of money. The famous 4% rule, built on decades of market data, was designed for a 30-year retirement. Stretch the horizon to 45 or 50 years, and researchers put the safe rate closer to 3%. That 1 percentage point feels small. But because the required portfolio equals your annual spending divided by the withdrawal rate, dropping from 4% to 3% forces you to hold 33% more money for identical annual spending. At $50,000 per year, a 65 retiree needs $1,250,000. A 40 retiree needs $1,667,000 before anything else. The 4% rule didn't shrink arbitrarily. It shrank because a longer runway means more chances for a catastrophic sequence of bad returns to permanently wreck your portfolio. The failure rate problem is stark. Historically, a 4% withdrawal from a balanced portfolio fails about 5% of the time over 30 years. Extend that to 50 years, and failure rates climb toward 20%. That's not a minor adjustment. 1 in 5 early retirees pulling 4% runs out of money before they die. Not because average returns were bad, but because the bad years came first. To see why sequence risk is so lethal at long horizons, walk through the numbers. A $1,250,000 portfolio taking a 35% crash in year 1 drops to roughly $762,500 before you've had a single full year of retirement. You still need to pull $50,000 out that year, leaving you around $712,500, a base that must now support 44 more years of withdrawals plus rising inflation. At a 20-year horizon, history says markets recover and you probably survive. At 45 years, that depleted base is compounding against you for decades. The math doesn't forgive an early bad sequence when you have no salary to fall back on. Now add inflation. And this is where a longer retirement stops being a linear problem and becomes an exponential one. At 3% inflation, $1 today costs $2.43 in 30 years. But push to 40 years and it's $3.26. Push to 50 years and it's $4.38. Your $50,000 lifestyle in today's dollars costs roughly $121,500 per year in nominal terms after 30 years and around $163,000 after 40 years. The portfolio must keep producing ever larger nominal withdrawals across a much longer track. A 20-year retiree barely reaches the steep part of that inflation curve. A 40-year retiree lives through the whole thing. There's a fourth force that's easy to overlook because it happens before retirement, not during it. Retiring at 40 doesn't just lengthen the drawdown. It eliminates 25 peak earning years. Those aren't average years. They're typically the highest salary years. The years with employer matches, the years when you finally have enough surplus to save aggressively. If peak career savings would have been $20,000 per year for 25 years growing at 7% real returns, that's roughly $1,265,000 in additional portfolio value permanently foregone. Money that would have been compounding for decades, not sitting idle. Here's what those foregone contributions look like against what a traditional retiree would have built. The early retiree's portfolio stops growing from contributions at 40. The traditional retiree keeps adding through 65, with those late contributions compounding at their most powerful. Each dollar contributed at 40 has 25 fewer years to compound than the same dollar contributed at 55. The gap isn't just the contributions themselves, it's the compound growth on every dollar that never got invested. That's the opportunity cost multiplier effect that FIRE calculators often underweight. Now stack all four effects together and watch what happens to the required number. Duration alone takes you from 20x to roughly 22x annual expenses. The lower safe withdrawal rate pushes the target to 33x. Add a 25% sequence risk buffer and the practical fire target lands around 41x annual expenses versus the traditional 25x. That's the combined multiplier, roughly 3.4 to 4.3 times the conventional nest egg. The headline of this episode isn't a dramatic exaggeration. It's just arithmetic stacked 4 times. So, the FIRE number for a $50,000 per year lifestyle is roughly $1,667,000 at the 3% SWR base. Add a 25% sequence buffer, and you're looking at about $2,083,000. That's not a soft guideline. That's the conservative mathematical floor. The traditional retiree needed $250,000. The early retiree needs $2,083,000 for the same lifestyle. The ratio is approximately 1.67. But because the early retiree also gave up $1,265,000 in portfolio value by not working those peak years, the real gap in net worth required at age 40 versus what you'd have had at 65 is closer to 4x. Which brings us to the insight that changes how serious FIRE planners actually approach this. The required portfolio equals annual expenses divided by your safe withdrawal rate. Both the numerator and the denominator are affected by spending. Cut your annual expenses and you directly shrink the numerator. The target gets smaller, but you also free up more of your income to save, which shrinks the time to reach the target. Earning $100,000 and spending $75,000 leaves $25,000 saved per year, a 25% savings rate. At that pace, retirement is roughly 42 years away. Now cut spending to $40,000. You're saving $60,000 per year, a 60% savings rate. Research on savings rates shows that a 60% savings rate gets you to financial independence in roughly 10 years, and your required nest egg just dropped from $20,500,000 to $1,333,000 because both your annual need and your target shrank together. That double compression is why spending cuts are so much more powerful than income increases in early retirement math. A dollar not spent saves you from earning it and from having to fund 45 years of it. The savings rate effect is worth seeing on a curve because the relationship is non-linear. Going from a 10% savings rate to a 20% savings rate barely moves the needle, still decades away. But going from 40% to 60% compresses the timeline dramatically. This is the S-curve of financial independence. Painful and slow in the early section, then suddenly steep. Most people trying to reach FIRE aren't grinding in the steep section yet because their spending is too high to get there, not because their income is too low. Sensitivity analysis confirms which variable matters most. Run the numbers. A 10% change in your expected return shifts your required portfolio modestly. A 10% change in sequence risk buffer shifts it a bit more. But a 10% change in annual expenses moves the required nest egg more than any other single variable. And it does it twice, because it cuts both the numerator and the annual savings target simultaneously. Annual spending is the single biggest lever in the entire FIRE equation by a meaningful margin over returns, timeline, or market assumptions. Put it all together, retiring at 40 instead of 65 hits you with 4 compounding penalties simultaneously. Your drawdown period grows 2.25x. Your safe withdrawal rate falls from 4% to roughly 3%. Inflation compounds across a 50-year nominal runway, and you forfeit 25 peak earning years. These don't add, they multiply. The result is a required nest egg roughly 4 times larger than the conventional wisdom number. The good news is, the solution is clean. The required portfolio scales directly with spending. So, the same discipline that builds your savings fast also cuts your target in half. That's the arithmetic of retiring early. And it's brutal. And it's beatable.